Lazy? Maybe. Or maybe your brain just got mugged by scrolling, cheap dopamine, and a phone that never shuts up. In this video, we dig into dopamine reset, dopamine detox, brain overstimulation, phone addiction dopamine, and how to improve focus naturally so you can stop feeling lazy and start thinking clearly again. Your motivation did not disappear. It got buried under scrolling, cheap entertainment, and a phone that never shuts up. What if I told you the scariest part about losing motivation is that it rarely feels dramatic at first? It does not arrive like some tragic collapse where you suddenly announce, "I have officially lost control of my life." No, it slips in quietly. It looks harmless. A few minutes on your phone in the morning, a little scrolling before work, a few cheap hits of stimulation to wake up. And then one day, without fully understanding how it happened, your goals start feeling distant, your focus starts feeling broken, and the things that matter most to you begin losing to a glowing rectangle full of strangers, arguing, and recommending protein powder. And that is the part I cannot stop thinking about. Because I do not think most people are lazy. I think a lot of people are overstimulated to the point that their own minds no longer feel like safe places to sit in. I think people are walking around calling themselves weak, undisciplined, inconsistent, when in reality, their brains have been trained to expect fireworks every 10 seconds. Then they sit down to do one normal human task like reading 3 pages or answering an email, and suddenly it feels like they're being asked to push a broken shopping cart uphill through wet cement. That is not a character flaw. That is a warning sign. Welcome back to Vex Oriss. And before we go any further, subscribe to the channel if you want to support more videos like this, because I have a feeling this conversation is going to explain something a lot of people have been blaming on their personality when it may actually be the environment slowly hijacking their brain. What fascinates me is how personal this has become for so many people. You wake up tired, reach for your phone, check one thing, then another, and before your feet even touch the floor, your brain has already consumed more stimulation than a human nervous system was probably designed to handle before breakfast. Sugar, caffeine, short videos, notifications, 10 open tabs, music in the background, thoughts racing in the foreground. It's not a morning routine anymore. It's a dopamine hostage situation. And then we wonder why work feels boring, why the gym feels heavy, why studying feels painful, why simple tasks feel strangely impossible. Maybe the real problem is not that you do not care. Maybe the real problem is that your brain has been so overfed, so over-entertained, so relentlessly stimulated that normal life can no longer compete. And if that's true, then this is where things get interesting. Because the moment you realize you are not broken, you also realize something else. You might recover your clarity faster than you think. And once you realize the problem may be overstimulation, not some fatal flaw in your personality, the next question becomes almost painfully obvious. What do you actually do about it? This is the part that interests me most, because people hear the phrase dopamine reset and immediately imagine something dramatic. They picture a person disappearing into the woods, eating raw almonds in silence, making eye contact with trees, and returning 48 hours later as a purified philosopher. But that's not what this is. A real 24-hour reset is much less theatrical and much more uncomfortable, because it asks you to do something modern life has trained you to avoid at all costs. It asks you to stop feeding your brain constant excitement and let it experience stillness again. For one day, the goal is simple. Remove the biggest dopamine triggers. No social media, no short-form videos, no scrolling just because your hand feels emotionally attached to your phone, no junk food spikes, no gaming spiral that begins as, "I'll just play for 20 minutes," and ends with you blinking at the clock like you have crossed into another timeline. No constant stimulation pouring into your ears from the second you wake up until the second you fall asleep. Not forever, just long enough for your brain to stop being shaken like a snow globe. And I think this is where the reset becomes revealing, because the first reaction is usually not peace, it is resistance. Your hand reaches for the phone before your mind even forms a thought. You feel bored in a way that almost feels insulting. Silence starts acting suspicious. Your brain, which has been living on instant novelty, suddenly reacts like a rich child being told there are no toys in the room. It sulks, it complains, it starts bargaining. Fine, no scrolling, but maybe just one quick check, maybe one tiny video, maybe one harmless little hit of nonsense. That reaction matters because it shows you how dependent your attention has become on stimulation. But that discomfort isn't proof the reset is failing. It's proof something real is happening. Most people are so used to constant input that when the noise stops, they don't feel calm at first. They feel exposed.
They meet the raw texture of their own mind without all the usual decorations, and that can feel weirdly intense. But if you stay with it, something starts to soften. The inner static loses a little power. Your thoughts stop sprinting quite so hard. The day begins to feel slower, and for once, slower is not the enemy. That's why the second step matters just as much as the first. You don't remove high stimulation and then sit around marinating in boredom like a Victorian ghost. You replace it with low dopamine activities that give your mind something gentle, steady, and human to hold on to. Go for a walk without turning it into a content consumption event. Read a few pages of a book and let your attention stay in one place long enough to remember it has knees. Journal, clean your room, stretch, move your body a little. Have a real conversation with someone instead of sending 3 dry texts and a reaction image like that counts as emotional intimacy. These things seem almost too simple, which is exactly why people underestimate them. They don't blast the brain with reward. They reintroduce it to subtler forms of satisfaction. A quiet walk begins to feel grounding. A clean room feels strangely honest. Reading becomes less painful. You start noticing that your mind is no longer lunging at every possible distraction like a caffeinated squirrel with Wi-Fi. And that, to me, is where the reset becomes more than a productivity trick. It becomes a way of teaching your brain that life doesn't need to be loud to feel meaningful. Sometimes what looks like boredom is just your nervous system learning how to be at peace. And once your brain begins to calm down, something even more revealing comes into view. The real damage was never just the overstimulation itself, but the order it taught you to live in. Because a lot of us have been living backwards for so long that it barely feels strange anymore. Reward first, effort later, comfort first, responsibility eventually. We wake up and hand our brains entertainment before they have earned a single thing, then spend the rest of the day wondering why meaningful work feels so emotionally offensive. Of course it does. You have already fed your nervous system dessert, applause, fireworks, and 5 flavors of distraction before asking it to sit still and care about something real. That's like giving a toddler a drum set, a milkshake, and a laser pointer, then asking for quiet reflection. And I think this is where motivation gets completely misunderstood. People talk about it like it's some magical feeling that either visits you or doesn't, like a moody houseguest with terrible communication skills. But the more I think about it, the more I believe motivation is often a result of structure. It grows when the brain learns that effort actually leads somewhere. It weakens when reward keeps showing up first, cheap and easy and constant, until the mind starts expecting pleasure without movement. That's why the final part of this reset matters so much. For these 24 hours, you deliberately reverse the pattern. You do the hard thing before the easy thing. You work before you indulge. You move before you melt into comfort. You finish the task before you go looking for a reward like a medieval king demanding grapes for having answered one email. And yes, at first this can feel annoyingly unnatural. Your brain will protest. It will suddenly become very philosophical about why now is actually the perfect time to take a quick break before beginning. It will invent fake urgency around things that don't matter. It will act like opening a spreadsheet is an act of historical oppression. But if you stay with the new order, something important starts happening. Effort stops feeling pointless. Completion starts feeling satisfying again. The brain begins reconnecting reward to progress instead of distraction. And that shift is bigger than it sounds, because when satisfaction starts coming from what you finish, not just from what you consume, discipline stops feeling like punishment. Focus feels less forced. Motivation becomes less theatrical and more dependable. It's no longer something you beg for, it's something you build. That to me is the real point of all this. Not becoming some perfect machine, not floating through life as a hyper-optimized productivity goblin who drinks green juice and speaks only in routines. The point is to rebuild a relationship with effort that feels honest, to teach your brain that meaning can come before pleasure, and pleasure feels better when it follows something real. And when that starts to happen, you don't just get your focus back, you start getting your self-respect back too. So maybe the truth is a little less dramatic and a lot more fixable than we've been telling ourselves. Maybe you weren't lazy, maybe you weren't broken, maybe your brain was just overworked in the weirdest possible way, not by deep effort, not by meaningful struggle, but by constant noise, cheap stimulation, and a digital environment that treats your attention like an all-you-can-eat buffet. And then we act surprised when our minds feel foggy, restless, and mysteriously allergic to effort. What a plot twist. We flood the brain with distraction all day, then expect it to sit down calmly, write, study, focus, or pursue a long-term goal like some enlightened monk with perfect Wi-Fi boundaries. The deeper lesson here is simple, but not easy. Your mind follows what you repeatedly feed it. If you train it to chase noise, it will resist silence. If you train it to expect reward before effort, it will resent discipline. But if you slowly teach it that peace is safe, effort is normal, and meaning can come before pleasure, your whole inner life starts to change. That's how motivation becomes less fake, less forced, and more dependable. It's no longer something you beg for, it's something you build. So here's the question I want to leave you with. What is the biggest distraction that steals your focus right now? Please share your answer politely in the comments so everyone can compare perspectives and learn from each other. And if this video spoke to you, subscribe to Vex Oriss and support the channel so we can keep making more meaningful videos like this.